Hello and welcome. This week's roundup highlights Ethiopia's role at the 80th UN General Assembly, where it laid a unified African call for urgent reform of the UN Security Council to better represent the Global South. Ethiopia argued that this reform is crucial for addressing Africa's key challenges such as development and climate justice. I'm your host, Gemechi Samandida, joined by my colleague, Zelalem Ibeldan. Stay with us. Zelalem, hello.
Hello, very good morning to you, Gemechi.
Yeah, you too. We are celebrating Meskel and Demera.
Definitely.
And of course, this festival that commemorates the founding of the Tree Cross. And I do hope that Ethiopians are celebrating happily this beautiful Meskel and Demera festival.
Yes, Gemechi. Meskel Festival, the founding of the True Cross, is being celebrated in Ethiopia almost in every part of the country. And Meskel Festival essentially celebrates and commemorates the founding of the True Cross, where Jesus Christ was crucified. And we also celebrated the Eve of Meskel yesterday evening, yesterday night. And here in the capital city of Ethiopia, Addis Ababa, at Meskel Square, a very iconic place in Addis Ababa, Meskel Festival was hugely and colorfully celebrated by tens of thousands of people. So we wish a happy Meskel to all who are celebrating this.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, today's topic that we are entertaining is the 80th UN General Assembly. It ran with the theme, Better Together, 80 Years and More for Peace, Development and Human Rights. And I think many things have been said about this. Can you just tell us, what has been going on, especially what has given emphasis?
Yes, Gemechi, as you rightly and interestingly elaborated, the United Nations General Assembly has been held in New York, United States of America, where the United Nations headquarters is found. So lots of speeches have been delivered, and we will be able to bring the most important and striking ideas and speeches delivered during the 80th United Nations General Assembly. So as you said, the theme of the 2025, the 80th United Nations General Assembly has been Better Together, 80 years and more for peace, development and human rights. By the way, the 80th United Nations General Assembly has coincided with the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. The United Nations, as we remember and as we learn in history, was established 8 decades ago, 8 years ago, after the Second World War. And we remember the devastating consequences and outcome of the Second World War. A terrible conflict, a terrible war that left millions of people, tens of millions of people died, and tens of millions of people displaced. And it was a horrible conflict. And after the end of the Second World War, the world had developed a strong desire and interest to establish an organization, to establish a global institution that can preserve world peace, that can preserve human rights, and that can help to propel economic growth in all parts of the world. And for that reason, the world established the United Nations. And over the last 8 decades or so, the United Nations has achieved important milestones. For example, in preventing conflict, in also eradicating pandemics such as the smallpox. However, at the United Nations approaches its 80 years anniversary, criticism also heard, in particular criticism towards the United Nations ineffectiveness to tackle the current challenge, to tackle the current realities of the world. So there are lots of criticism being raised on the United Nations. So they are also, advocating for the United Nations reform, urgent reform. We will, of course, come back to the major ideas entertained with regards to the essentialities, the necessities and the urgency of reforming the United Nations later. So as you said, lots of speech delivered. For example, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, the Chairperson of African Union Commission, His Excellency Mohamed Ali Yusuf, the Chairperson of African Union, and of course the President of Angola, João Lourenço, delivered important speech there at 80th United Nations General Assembly. Ethiopia was, of course, represented by its president, Taye Atskasillase, the president of the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. So President Taye Atskasillase, along with his team, his delegation, went to New York, United States, and participated at the 80th United Nations General Assembly. And of course, Ethiopia's delegation also conducted and made different discussions, side discussions, alongside with the United Nations General Assembly. And we will also elaborate on the major discussions conducted by Ethiopian delegations later in our discussion.
Yes, African leaders, of course, gave emphasis, especially on inclusivity and representation at this high-level general debate of the 80th UN General Assembly. Well, leaders such as President Imbalo and Guinea-Bissau's President Imbalo and Botswana's President Boko articulated the importance of fairness and equal participation in global governance. As you said earlier, when the Second World War ended, nations, of course, came together in the U.S., in the U.S. City, New York, and then they established, this United Nations. And the purpose, as you said, is, of course, to ensure that peace would prevail after that. And then Second World War, that was devastating, would be avoided at the most possible situation. However, as time goes, in the last decades, ever since this World War II ended, the world entertained, a lot of ups and downs in terms of ensuring peace and ensuring, development in many parts of the world, and especially the global south has been badly affected by unfair governance. And African leaders, including our president, Taye Atskasillase, emphasized the need, to come to a center where fairness will be, maintained. And they say that, the global south has not been entertained properly. And there is a very small representation of the global south, especially the African continent, and something must be done about it. And so these African leaders, they echoed the sentiment by highlighting that Africa's voice remains underrepresented and demanding a permanent seat on the Security Council to enhance the legitimacy and universality of the UN. UN, in terms of the opportunities it provides, is limited with the so-called the First World Order, the first
the developed world,
the developed
basically
world,
the Westerns
in general, are rather than developing nations, especially
the global south.
Generally the global south. So something new must be done, and a new approach must be put on the ground.
Yes, exactly. That's what many leaders, in particular leaders from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia, and from the general global south entertained during the 80th United Nations General Assembly. As you said, Gemich, Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, also entertained the idea of the necessity of reforming the United Nations. In particular, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that 80 years ago, 8 decades ago, the world established the United Nations to preserve conflict, to preserve war, to save the world from another devastating conflict like the Second World War or the First World War. By the way, before the establishment of the United Nations, there was a global organization meant to preserve world peace and security, and that was League of Nations. And because the League of Nations was found to be ineffective, the world rushed to another devastating war called the Second World War. So after Second World War, the world established the United Nations essentially to preserve world peace, to preserve human rights, and to coordinate efforts toward humanitarian crisis, humanitarian assistance. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, said 80 years ago the world established the United Nations for the sake of preserving world peace. But 80 years later, 8 decades later, the world is facing the same problem that is faced 80 years ago. He said that currently the world is facing problem of violence, problem of war, problem of climate disaster, and these problems like conflict, instability, and climate disaster dominated the world we live in today. There must be something new. There must be something some idea, some insights and perspectives that can transform the United Nations. In particular, Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that against these backdrops, despite this challenge, the challenge of war and violence and climate disaster, the United Nations has achieved important milestones. As a matter of fact, the United Nations achieved success in terms of preserving conflict, for example. The United Nations conducted successful peacekeeping missions in different countries of the world. And of course, the United Nations also has been successful in combating and eradicating pandemics such as smallpox. However, at this time, at this critical historical juncture, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, called world leaders to combine effort, to multiply effort, to put lots of efforts to strengthen the United Nations, so that the United Nations can discharge its responsibility. Therefore, the United Nations can live up to the expectation of the people. And Secretary General Antonio Guterres said, in the world where there are many choices, there is one choice that leaders of the world should never make, and that is the choice of giving up, the choice of give up hope on the United Nations. And he promised to the leaders that he will never give up to the aim of the United Nations. He will never give up on the United Nations. So he will continue to struggle for strengthening the United Nations, so that the organization can answer to the global quest for peace, security, and development. So this was one of the most important ideas. Of course, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, made this speech in an opening of the United Nations high-level debate. There are enormous speeches delivered during the 80th United Nations General Assembly. The African leaders, leaders of African Continental Organization, also made important insights during the assembly.
Yes, during this assembly, again, African leaders, of course, delivered speeches on challenges and opportunities in Africa's development and security. We have leaders such as Vice President Jallow of the Gambia, and Vice President Lagu of South Sudan, who highlighted, Africa's vulnerabilities to external shocks such as food and energy crisis, debt burdens, and internal conflicts. Of course, their emphasis is on the fact that, Africa's problems or challenges are unique, and so they need, just unique solutions. And in this case, they said regional cooperation, sustainable development, and empowerment of local solutions are needed. And for these African leaders, African nations in general, just need to come together, and they have to focus, for example, on post-conflict recovery, humanitarian aid, and institution building, emphasizing that global stability is intertwined with the development of vulnerable nations. So, at the UN, both the rich and the poor nations have come together, and whatever challenges or problems they deliver during this period of time, in that particular UN General Assembly, they have, unique features, problems with unique features. And so they need to be addressed, in unique manners. And the African leaders, of course, said that, we need to be listened to, and our challenges need to be, properly addressed, and we need to come together. We need to bring in, efforts and resources together to solve our problems. This is
exactly
what they said.
That's of course the beauty of the United Nations. You know, the United Nations is an important platform where every part of the world, as you said, rich, poor, strong, weak, you know, every part of the world are invited to the United Nations General Assembly, and they get an opportunity, a chance to deliver their concern, to address their concern for the United Nations General Assembly. I think it's pretty much important to bring the idea of Chairperson of African Union Commission, His Excellency Mohammed Ali Yusuf. He also delivered a speech there, and in particular he addressed the African Union Peace and Security Council, sidelined with the 80th United Nations General Assembly. He addressed the African Union Peace and Security Council. There he said that still conflict, violence and instability are the major problems of Africa. The continent is struggling with conflict and war. That must end, Mohammed Ali Yusuf, Chairperson of African Union Commission, said. And he also proposed a strategy, a comprehensive key strategies to tackle conflicts, instabilities that are occurred here and there in Africa. And one of the key strategies that the Chairperson of African Union Commission, Mohammed Ali Yusuf, brought is anticipation. Africa needs to develop its anticipation skill. Africa needs to anticipate conflict. Of course, many of the security challenges in conflict and war in Africa are not unpredictable. They are in fact predictable. So Africa needs to strengthen its effort, its capacity to anticipate the future, to anticipate security challenge, violence and conflicts. And he said that Africans need to utilize resources, technologies like artificial intelligence and big data analytics to predict the future, to anticipate the future, so that Africans can prevent war before it occurred. That was one of the strategy, the key strategy that the Chairperson of African Union Commission, His Excellency Mohammed Ali Yusuf, brought. The other is the second strategy he delivered is the crisis management. Africa also needs to work on crisis management. Yes, crisis may happen, and to some extent crisis is natural, conflict is natural. It may happen everywhere, every time. So we need to develop a skill, a capacity to contain crisis and to manage crisis. So crisis management is the second strategy that Mohammed Ali Yusuf brought. So Africa needs to strengthen its effort and capacity to build a capacity to manage crisis. And the third strategy he brought is structural prevention. By supporting peace efforts, by supporting peace infrastructure in all parts of Africa, we can prevent crisis, we can prevent conflict before it happens. So three strategies Mohammed Ali Yusuf, Chairperson of African Union Commission, recommended. So he said that by modernizing African peace and security infrastructure and by fostering collective leadership, Africa can get rid of conflict and can prosper and can build a prosperous continent.
Yes, sustainable development and climate justice are intertwined. They are interconnected. We can't help it. Well, this climate summit that took place in Addis Ababa recently emphasized the need for rich countries to support, poor countries. The developed nations ought to support these developing nations in their endeavor towards ensuring that they can get, out of a climate hit situation. We know because of industrialization, carbon monoxide or carbon dioxide emission has been, so huge that developing nations, including Ethiopia, most of them, in the African continent, their agriculture has been badly affected. And for this, these rich countries, have been suggested, to come and just, do something like, by investing, finance, proper finance, to support, the agriculture sector that has been badly hit by climate change. And so, as you said earlier, we have to focus on, the use of renewable energy and the utilization of technology. We know Africa is endowed with, natural resources. It is rich in everything that has to do with nature. Unfortunately, you know, because of lack of enough technology, Africa couldn't be able to use it yet. And it is quite true that it's obvious that, you know, Europeans, Americans, those nations, you know, in the advanced part of in the global north, they are rich, and if they share, you know, just their technology to African countries, to the developing world in general, they'll be able to bring about, you know, just the kind of change they want. And I think the UN is meant, you know, to ensure that equal participation in development is ensured.
Yeah, exactly. Interesting.
Yeah, so leaders such as President Boko discussed, you know, the potential of resource wealth, such as diamonds. Well, of course, diamonds, gold, minerals, they are exported from Africa to the developed nations, but this is actually causes, you know, fragility of resource dependence. And so the president, you know, called for global partnerships in renewable energy, technology and sustainable agriculture, especially for semi-arid nations vulnerable to climate change. Many African countries, they are exposed to climate change vulnerability that arises from climate change. And so they need to be supported. And of course, for this, there must be, you know, resource management and climate resilience. And this highlights, you know, the need for global cooperation. You know, the developed nations, you know, have succeeded in controlling, you know, more or less their harsh environments, climate conditions.
And they're trying.
Of course. They are productive, you know, in say very cold places, areas, and those technologies, you know, could be adopted by African countries, for example. Actually, in many parts of Africa, we have, you know, this desert condition, and that's not favorable for agriculture. But if you employ technology, it is very likely that, you know, you can succeed. If you take, you know, Israel, for example, they are very good at agricultural technologies, you know, that allows them to produce agricultural products which they export to the rest of the world and generate, you know, revenue out of it. So countries in Africa as well can borrow knowledge, and they can use technology, you know, just to be as productive.
Exactly. As you said, Gemechis, Africa is a continent that contributes very much less to the global warming, very much less to carbon emission. But Africa is the continent which is hard hit by the consequence, the outcome of climate change. So the global north, I mean the developed world, need to discharge their responsibility, need to support Africans in their climate mitigation activities. That's very much essential. Let us talk a little bit about the essentialities, I mean the urgency of reforming the United Nations. You know, almost all African leaders and leaders of continental organization in Africa advocated for United Nations reform. And one of the speaker in the United Nations General Assembly in the 2025 United Nations General Assembly was chairperson of Africa Union and the president of Angola, His Excellency Joe Lourenço. And Joe Lourenço said that the United Nations must be reformed. It's very much urgent, he said. He said that the United Nations Security Council in particular needs to allocate at least two permanent seats for Africans. And he said that for Africans to be represented well, for Africans to be fairly represented, even Africa needs to get 5 non-permanent seats in the United Nations Security Council. And he said that this is the right of Africans, you know, the right to be represented in the United Nations Security Council. You know, the paradox is Africa is a population of 1.4 billion. You know, 1.4 billion people live in Africa, and it's like 17% of the world population lives here in African soil. but Africans are denied of a single seat in the United Nations Security Council. So it's very much unfair, and it's very much timely to request for permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council. And the idea of reforming the United Nations has been advocated by almost all African leaders, almost all leaders from Global South, from Latin America, from Middle East, from Asia, and from Africa as well. So the chairperson of Africa Union, the president of Angola, Joe Lorenzo, advocated for urgent reform of the United Nations. And the other leader who delivered a speech in relation to reforming the United Nations was, of course, Ethiopia's president, His Excellency Taye Asqasselassy. President Taye said the United Nations has achieved important milestone over the past 8 years, like preserving conflict, like providing aid, providing development assistance to those who are in desperate need of aid and development assistance, to eradicate pandemics such as smallpox, and to reduce extreme poverty as well. The United Nations has achieved important success over the past 8 decades, but at this time, you know, the United Nations is ill-fitted, ill-suited to confront today's challenge, to confront the current realities of the world. So the United Nations, in fact, needs to be reformed to discharge the responsibility mandated by peoples of the world. And that was the idea very much echoed by many leaders, including Ethiopia's president, His Excellency Taye Asqasselassy.
Yes, he referred to systemic inequities or inequalities that favor historically dominant nations, in decision-making processes, often marginalizing Africa and other regions in every aspect.
In every aspect.
Say, for example, political decisions actually are made, by the United Nations Council, Security Council, for example. We have, we know who have, this veto power.
Yeah, exactly.
They are very few in number. And the African continent is excluded. And even it doesn't have, a single representation, genuine representation. Except, just those in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, you don't have, very as equally dominant, nations as those, in the Security Council. And this has caused, development challenges for the developing world in general, and including, of course, dominantly, the African continent. And all these leaders, in one way or another, have emphasized that this needs to change. Okay, and traditionally, we have, dominant nations, and because of, this systemic error, they benefit. Only they benefit, and the African continent is, we can say, suffering. When the decisions are made, the African continent or the global south is locked outside. Okay, and this has to change. Why should it change? Because if the UN is meant, to execute its promises when it was established, back in the years, then there must be, a genuine share of power, a genuine share of, resources as well. Say, technology, say finance, say political power. This has to reach, the countries or the nations in the global south, including, many African countries. So, as you said earlier, His Excellency Taye Asqasselassy, the president of Ethiopia, has emphasized the need, for kind of change or reform in many aspects, of course, political, economic, and social.
Gamage, let me add a few words regarding the United Nations, regarding the urgency of reforming the United Nations. As you said, research showed that most of the ideas, the topics, the issues entertained in the United Nations Security Council are, of course, issues of Africa. Africans are struggling with prolonged conflict, internal instability, violence, and conflict. So most of the issues deliberated on the United Nations Security Council are issues of Africa. But issues of Africa are being discussed, and the United Nations Security Council passed decisions about Africa in the absence of Africa, not in the presence of Africa. And this is like just this is like I'm pretending to take care of your well-being more than you do. So it's not logical. So it's high time that the United Nations Security Council needs to include Africans. African voice needs to be heard loud in the United Nations Security Council. And of course, other apparatus, I mean, other frameworks of the United Nations, like financial architecture needs to be changed, needs to be reformed to include the voice of Africa. For example, if you see the debt structure in Africa, you know, Africans are suffering from high level of debt. So rather than investing on education, health and other infrastructure, Africans are, you know, hard hit by debt. So such as credit rating agencies need to be reformed to include the interests of Africa. This is very much essential. And that was the central idea, very much entertained in the 80s United Nations General Assembly.
Mounting debt,
Mounting debt.
on these African countries has brought, you know, just their development back. Okay, these countries, you know, when they're unable to pay, you know, just their debts, and then obviously their development is impacted negatively.
Exactly.
And these days, of course, we have, for example, population growth. Okay, the people need development. The people need, you know, economic freedom, and African citizens or people in the African continent and in the rest of the developing world, they all need, you know, changes, progress in their economic activities. Unfortunately, you know, when these countries are unable to pay their debts, and when they're always in debt, obviously their development activities are hampered, which become, you know, a cause for political instability, conflict in many parts of the developing world, including, you know, just Africa. Well, when your economy is badly affected, obviously peace and stability is likely to be affected negatively, because poverty is, you know, just the cause of any evil, such as lack of peace, lack of stability, lack of economic development. So, you know, the demands of citizens unprecedentedly, you know, has skyrocketed, and nations are required, you know, to respond to the needs of their citizens. And unless and otherwise, you know, just they have peace, they have technology, they cannot be successful in delivering them. And so during this UN Assembly, this UN General, the 80th UN General Assembly, African leaders are really determined to get, you know, their voice, you know, heard, so that they just get the kind of response from the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's very much striking. You know, poverty is the mother of all problems, we can say. You know, if Africans can reduce the level of poverty they are in, you know, they can propel their economic growth. I mean, they can significantly reduce the amount of conflict that have been occurred in various parts of the continent. We are discussing on the 2025 United Nations General Assembly, the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly. In the Assembly, Ethiopia has also been represented by its President, Taye Atske-Selassie, and the President of the country, together with his delegation, also made side talks, sideline with the United Nations General Assembly. Ethiopians also discussed with other countries, I mean leaders of other countries and leaders of various continental and global organizations. And His Excellency Taye Atske-Selassie also discussed with the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. So in their discussion, His Excellency Taye Atske-Selassie discussed regarding Ethiopia's newly completed Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. And of course, Antonio Guterres also congratulated Ethiopians for the successful completion of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which is the largest hydropower project in Africa and one of the top 10 largest dams in the world. So Antonio Guterres congratulated Ethiopia, and of course His Excellency Taye Atske-Selassie also discussed the significance of building that huge dam hydropower project. In his discussion with Antonio Guterres, President Taye said the dam will be able to generate more than 5,000 megawatts of electricity, renewable energy, and that shows Ethiopia's commitment and dedication for cleaner energy, which is very much in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, Antonio Guterres also supported Ethiopia's effort of generating energy, renewable energy from hydro power projects. His Excellency Taye Asqasslasey also discussed with the President of United Nations General Assembly and during his speech in the 80th United Nations General Assembly, Taye Asqasslasey also talked about Ethiopia's interest in the Red Sea and in the Indian Ocean, and he called for equal and fair participation, involvement and utilization of the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. And of course, he discussed Ethiopia's interest to secure sea access. And as we know, Ethiopia is the largest landlocked country in the world. That means there is no country in the world, no country in the entire planet which has huge population like Ethiopia and doesn't have access to the sea. And Ethiopian government, together with its people, is trying to secure sea access, but through diplomatic and peaceful means. He also entertained the idea of the interest of Ethiopia with regard to sea access during the 80th United Nations General Assembly.
Yeah, well, the GERD is not, is not, a plant, I mean, the GERD is not, it doesn't just, produce electricity, clean energy. It means a lot, especially with its role in integrating, this, the Horn of Africa and the rest of Africa even. It becomes, a very good model as well for many African countries to utilize, to harness, just their natural resources. Well, recently, after the completion of the GERD, we hear from different African countries that, their nations need to follow Ethiopia's step in building similar dams in their countries, and especially those countries that have, rivers that have not been, used for similar projects for, say, producing electricity. They are calling on, their governments, their respective governments, to build similar dams, similar projects, in their countries. So the GERD has become, a very good example for other African countries, and even it is changing the way, just other nations, look at Ethiopia in terms of, using its Abai River or the Nile. They are appreciating Ethiopia's action or Ethiopia's success in completing the dam, and that, that of course starting, to look at the positive side of completing, just the dam.
Yeah.
Okay, so those countries that used to be, adversaries, or that are still adversaries, in some way are looking, the positive side of the GERD. Their citizens are looking at the fact that, this dam would be, something useful for them as well. So the GERD really is changing how nations,
how we think of development,
how nations view us, how nations, view Ethiopia in general, and they are so happy with the completion of the GERD, we can say. Zelalem, can we go to Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's recent visit to Moscow?
All right. I think it's a huge issue and huge idea. And of course, we can entertain the issue of Ethiopia's Prime Minister visit to Moscow, Russia, in another show. But, to give a quick information regarding Prime Minister Dr. Abiy Ahmed's visit to Moscow, obviously, His Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed traveled to Moscow, Russia, to discuss with the President of Russian Federation, His Excellency Vladimir Putin, on on the issue of building nuclear energy here in Ethiopia. We remember on September 9 when the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam was inaugurated. His Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed promised lots of things for his people, for Ethiopians, and one of his promise was to build nuclear energy here in Ethiopia. And based on that promise, he traveled few weeks after his promise, he traveled to Moscow, Russia, and he discussed with Russian President Vladimir Putin, and hopefully their discussion will be translated into action, and Ethiopia will be able to build nuclear energy for peaceful, for development purpose.
Yeah, Zelalem, I think I need to be clear with the fact that today's discussion better be devoted to the 80th UN General Assembly than Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's visit to Moscow.
Yeah.
So anything that has to do with his visit, I hope and I think should be entertained some other time.
Yeah, exactly.
Than right today.
Yes.
So I think it's necessary that we halt our program.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Zelalem, I think time limits us here, and thank you very much for your excellent reflection on the points we raised during our program. Thank you, Zelalem.
Thank you so much.
Viewers, thank you very much for watching our program, and today's program, of course, ends right here, and next time we'll come up with a new episode. Until then, goodbye to you.